welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. My name is Angela, and today's video is going to be another paranormal video. Surprise, I know, but I did take a poll on Instagram to ask you guys what topic you wanted to see next when it comes to paranormal stuff, and a lot of you said you would be interested to hear about, a famous paranormal case in history. So I did do some research, and the case that I decided to talk about today is going to be the Enfield Haunting, and this took place in London, and it's actually a very, very famous case. And this case is specifically about a poltergeist. If you don't know what a poltergeist is, in German it translates to noisy ghost. And the reason for this is because in cases like this, paranormal activity can get very physical. So when things are being literally thrown around, slammed around in front of you by an unseen entity. So things are being, thrown around the room, and in very, very severe cases, even people can be attacked by unseen forces. This is more rare in the paranormal activity area, but it has been reported, and from the people who have experienced it, it has been a very traumatizing and scary experience. So if you are interested to hear about this case, then just keep watching. So the Enfield Haunting, this case is actually what inspired the sequel to The Conjuring. So this case is what inspired The Conjuring 2. Obviously things are very hyped up and changed for dramatization in Hollywood, so I'm sure there were some things that happened in the movie that didn't happen in real life, but this case is what inspired that movie. So in 1977, a single parent by the name of Peggy Hodgson, she moved into 284 Green Street in Enfield, UK with her 4 children, Margaret, Janet, Johnny, and Billy. And it wasn't long after they moved in that things started happening that they couldn't explain. And in the beginning, of course, it was kind of not taken very seriously as the kids would start to experience things, but then it started to escalate and become very unexplainable and very scary. And eventually it caught the media's attention, and that's how it became one of the most famous cases to date. So soon after they moved in, Peggy's kids, mainly her daughters, so her daughters were the main focus of this entity, and they received most of the experiences and the attention from this negative energy. And they would tell their mom, Peggy, that they would hear knocking from within the walls in their rooms. And at first, her mom kind of wrote it off as, we just moved into this new place and we're adjusting. But things just kept escalating and getting worse. And then Peggy started to realize that things were happening as well. Furniture was starting to move, objects such as toys were being thrown around the house by unseen forces. Sometimes they were even being thrown at people. And it was also reported that sometimes these objects were so hot that they were too hot to touch. Eventually, like I said, Peggy noticed that this entity seemed to focus all of their energy and attention on her daughters, especially her youngest daughter Janet, which was only 11. And the last straw for Peggy was when a chest of drawers slid across the room, almost, crushing her children and putting them in danger. And she really didn't know what to do at that point. So she called the police, because honestly, when something like that happens, what do you do? Especially back in the 1970s, it's like, who are you supposed to call for that? So initially 2 police officers were sent out to the home, and of course they thought it was like a hoax or like a prank. They didn't take it seriously, and I mean, why would they? Most people wouldn't, because it's just, especially like back in the 1970s, something like that just wasn't heard of or studied very much. But that did change when a police officer, it was unclear in the website that I read if she arrived after or if she was one of the 2 officers, but her name was Caroline Heaps, and she experienced something that made her believe the family. So she saw a chair slide across the room by itself, and that really scared her. And in one of the videos that I was watching, I was able to find some footage on YouTube of this woman actually talking about her experience seeing this chair, and she said she looked for strings and she looked under the chair. She was trying to find some explainable, some way to explain how this happened, and there was just no way to explain how this happened other than something paranormal. I'm not going to insert any clips like that because I don't want my video to get copyrighted or, get in trouble for putting copyrighted video content into my video. But if you do want to look that up, you can definitely do that. Or I can try as well to put some videos in my description box as well if you want to investigate this further after watching this. So this police officer, Caroline Heaps, was shocked, and she really didn't know what to do or how to help Peggy, because honestly, what could law enforcement do? They can't arrest something or get rid of of something that they cannot see. So she actually encouraged Peggy to contact the media, and that is what Peggy did next. After Peggy contacted the media, two journalists by the name of Graham Morris and Douglas Bentz from the Daily Mirror newspaper came to her house to cover the story. So that evening they sat in their living room and they talked about the events that had happened prior for about an hour or so, and nothing happened. So the journalists went out to their car and started to wrap up so that they could head home, but they were stopped when Peggy came out very frantically, and they ran back in with her. And when they went back into the house, supposedly there were a bunch of objects flying around the room, crashing into walls and even people. And one of the journalists, Graham Morris, ran back out to his car to get his camera, where when I read that I was very confused, because I feel like if you're a journalist trying to catch things on camera and somebody comes out frantically, you would just think to maybe have your camera in your hand already. So I don't know. But anyways, he went back out to his vehicle to get his camera and went back inside, and he started taking a bunch of pictures. But from the article that I read, unfortunately, they were not able to get any of this paranormal activity on camera. So I'm not sure if it's because it stopped by the time he went back in or what happened, but he was not able to capture any of this happening. So at this point, Peggy was really at a loss for what to do. So next she contacted the Society for Psychical Research. I think I'm saying that right. So I didn't know what this was until I looked it up on Google, obviously. And basically, it was set up in London in 1882. So it's a society that basically they examine claims of psychic and paranormal phenomena. So basically they study it, and their entire purpose is to gather information and foster, understanding through research and education. And what I just said is basically exactly what was written in the Wikipedia page that I found. So sorry if that sounds kind of formal, but that's basically what they do. So she contacted them. So at this point, two paranormal investigators by the names of Maurice Gross and Guy Lyon Playfair spent 13 months with the family. And basically, they just spent that time investigating and documenting the things that were happening within the house, and they came to the conclusion that this family was definitely experiencing a poltergeist. And like I said, they were documenting all of these incidents. So according to the article that I read, they recorded that out of all the incidents that happened, there were 26 of these incidents that could not be rationally explained. And these incidents included anything from levitations, apparitions, sheets being pulled from beds, water puddles on the floor where nobody could figure out where they came from, fires starting spontaneously in the house and then quickly being extinguished. They even had, issues with technology that couldn't be explained. The article that I read also mentioned that the BBC news crew came to visit the house, and when they went to look back at the footage, I guess one of their machines, something inside of it was bent, so the metal inside their machines was bent, and all their footage that they had recorded had been lost. So they spent all that time documenting, and it was all gone. So in November, this was about 3 months into Gross and Playfair's investigation. They were the paranormal investigators, and basically the paranormal activity started to get a lot stronger. The loud knocking that they would hear within the walls started to get stronger and more consistent, so it started happening more often. And at this point, the paranormal investigators thought that maybe this was a way of the entity trying to communicate with them. So they started telling it to answer questions by knocking once or knocking twice. And according to the article that I read, this entity or whatever it was listened. So it was starting to communicate with them. And around this time, Janet began to fall into trance-like states, and she also acted out very violently, supposedly, and was even reported to have superhuman strength at some point. So they were very concerned for her safety, obviously, so I guess she was restrained and sedated. So at this point, like I said at the beginning of the story, most of the paranormal activity was taking place in the girls' bedroom. So I don't know if I was clear about that in the beginning of the story. So Janet shared a bedroom with her older sister, Margaret. I believe her older sister was 14. So they had two twin beds and they shared a bedroom. And this is where most of the paranormal activity was taking place. So Graham Morris from the Daily Mirror, who I mentioned earlier in the story, he was actually a photographer. So he decided he wanted to see if he could capture any of this paranormal activity on camera. So he set up a remote control camera system in the bedroom, and it was set to take a photo every 4 seconds. So by doing that, he was actually able to catch the moment that Janet was being violently thrown from her bed in the middle of the night by an unseen force. And there are people who think that this was all just a big hoax, because if you look at the picture, you know, she definitely could have just been jumping, but obviously though too, if it was an unseen force, what's to say that that's not what it would look like? So it's just very, very hard to tell, and I will get more into that later on in the story, but this photo that I'm showing you right now is supposed to be her being thrown by an unseen force from her bed in the middle of the night. At this point, Janet just kind of started to get worse. She continued to fall in and out of trances, and then at some point she started speaking in a really deep voice, almost like a man-like voice, and when she spoke in this voice, she referred to herself as a man named Bill. And Gross and Playfair, I'm going by their last names, guys, because they have long names and I don't want to confuse anybody, so they were actually there during one of these episodes when she was talking in this deep voice, and they started to interview her, or Bill. So when they interviewed her, or him, he told them through her that he had died from a brain hemorrhage in that house a couple years prior, sitting in his favorite chair. And something that is very interesting is that they were actually contacted separately, I think, by a man named Terry Wilkins, who said that Bill was his father and that everything that she said was true. Because when I was doing my research, actually, there is a recording of her talking in this voice and of this interview. I decided not to listen to all of it because it just kind of creeped me out, but if you want to listen to it, please feel free to. But basically, he called and told them that, you know, everything he said was correct. So by this point, it was July in 1978, and Janet was admitted to a psychiatric hospital, and she stayed there for 2 months. And basically they, you know, did extensive testing to see if there was something wrong with her, I guess, and they couldn't find anything psychiatrically wrong with her, so they released her. And I guess apart from a sudden burst in paranormal activity in the house in 1980, I guess it stopped out of nowhere, because the article that I read said that the haunting had seemingly ended as quickly as it had begun, apart from the sudden burst in activity in 1980, but then I guess it just stopped. I read a couple articles and I couldn't find a lot of information on this, so I think that's where it stops. So apart from the paranormal investigators Gross and Playfair, who were with the family throughout all of this, there were actually 2 other paranormal investigators that were also from the Society for Psychical Research, who were kind of on the fence. They weren't as convinced as Playfair and Gross were that this was a real thing that was happening. They kind of had their doubts and thought that it could be a hoax. So these 2 other investigators basically thought that the children were the cause of all of this stuff happening when they walked in on the 2 girls bending spoons. So I don't know if they were trying to make it look like paranormal activity was going on that wasn't. And the girls, Margaret and Janet, the 2 sisters, did admit that they did do some of these things, but they did say that they did not do all of it, that there was definitely paranormal activity and a poltergeist in their house. And in defense of the family, Gross, who was one of the paranormal investigators that believed the girls, said of course they played tricks, they are children, but it was nothing to the real thing. So basically the tricks that they played could not compare to the real stuff that was actually happening within the house. And people were also skeptical of the photos of Janet being thrown from her bed, and I believe there also is one of both of the girls laying on the ground from after they were both thrown from their beds. And obviously it's possible that all this could have been staged, but it's very possible that it wasn't either. And I just think that it's something that we will never know because we weren't there and we didn't experience it. And also, while I was doing my research on this case, I didn't realize until I saw that The Conjuring 2 was inspired by this case that Ed and Lorraine Warren were involved in this. So if you don't know who Ed and Lorraine Warren are, they are very famous paranormal investigators. If you've seen the movie Annabelle, that is based off a true story or true events that happened with these paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren. They were very, very involved in that case specifically. And in The Conjuring 2, they are considered or shown to be very, very involved in this case, the Enfield Haunting, or, you know, the inspired events of the Enfield Haunting as well. But in real life, according to the articles that I read, Ed and Lorraine Warren actually showed up uninvited to the house to investigate, and I believe they were actually only there for one day. So according to the research that I did, I could not find any evidence that showed that they were a big part of this case, like it was showcased to be in the movie. So they actually, I don't think, were a big part of this case at all. So basically, experts really can't come to an agreement as to whether this was real or if it was a hoax, but the people who were involved in it, of course, claim that it really happened and that they have been forever affected and traumatized by these experiences. So that is pretty much it. That is the case of the Enfield Haunting. And I would love to know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think it was a hoax? Do you think it really happened? I would be very interested to hear what you guys think about this. So that's really all I have for you today. I really hope that you enjoyed this story. And if you want to see more videos like this, just let me know. I love digging into cases like this and really finding out the facts and what happened and what didn't happen. So if you have any paranormal cases or mysteries that you would like me to dig into on my channel, definitely comment below and let me know. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, because I do post new videos every single week, and I would love for you to join our YouTube family. And with that being said, as always, I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!